All right, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We will be talking about our public participation plan and our air quality conformity documents, both of which are out for public review. To get us started, I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Sandy Miswitz. I'm the Executive Director of the Capital Region Transportation Council. And I'll share a little bit about who we are and what we do here. We are the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Capital Region. We provide a forum for regional transportation planning and policy making. We assign federal funds to transportation plans, projects, and programs in the Capital Region. We represent 4 counties: Albany, Rensselaer, Saratoga, and Schenectady. And we have a number of requirements as an MPO, 2 of which are to maintain a public participation plan, and the other is to undertake air quality conformity. And I'll talk about both of these documents in today's presentation. So what is a public participation plan? This is a document, again, that we're required to do under federal law. But what it really does is it provides the baseline of our standards for public outreach and engagement. It communicates to the public how you can interact with us. And also it communicates how we're evaluating how we're doing with our planning and participation activities. We define who the public is. And in truth, the public is anyone who resides, works, visits, or has an interest in or does business in our planning area that may be affected by transportation decisions. That may be an individual, could be an organization, could be a governmental agency. As part of the public participation plan, we have a number of federal requirements that we have to meet. Some of them are tied to the Civil Rights Act, particularly Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, just to name a few. So our plan has 4 primary goals. We want to have a continuous, thorough, inclusive, and effective public participation process. Continuous means simply that we are constantly doing public participation and engagement. It starts at the earliest phases of a plan or a project and continues throughout the activity until it's complete. And even after it's complete, we like to continue communications with the affected area. We want it to be thorough, so meaning we want to make sure that folks have as many opportunities to engage and participate as possible, that we try to tailor some of those opportunities to the populations that live in the study area, if it's a sub area of our region with certain demographic characteristics. And we certainly try to give folks as much notification as possible, which this plan documents. We want to be inclusive, so making sure that, again, we have diverse viewpoints, values, a broad representation of the community, and that we incorporate community-initiated efforts into the planning process as much as possible. And then we measure effectiveness by evaluating how we did. We look at different metrics, both qualitative and quantitative, to assess and improve on our public engagement efforts. So to walk through some of the chapters of our public participation plan, I'll start with public participation in our Transportation Council planning process. One of the things that we do now as part of our procedures is for each core planning activity, and by core, I mean these would be regional scale plans that we prepare as an MPO. They're required to develop what's called a public involvement plan. So this is a plan that's tailored to each regional initiative, documents the process that we use for each public engagement activity. And we also do this for all of our sub-area studies, which include community and transportation linkage planning projects, which can be in a community, it can be in a sub-area community. And again, we tailor these public involvement plans to each planning study based on demographic data and the context of the study or the study area. We summarize all of this information in the final report so that we can also evaluate how the public process worked. So to walk through the different goals and sort of our required elements and some of the practices that we're proposing in our public participation plan that tie to these public involvement plans. First, under the goal of continuous, some of the required actions is we want to make sure that at key decision points in the planning process, that there's always an opportunity for the public to weigh in. That may be through community surveys, it may be through workshops, and maybe through other tools. But we always try to make sure that these key decision points, particularly when we're seeking input on what issues exist in the study area, and also on the draft recommendations and concepts that are being developed. We want to make sure that those opportunities for engagement exist. We also allow the public to have an opportunity to weigh in on the draft and final documents to make sure that they have an opportunity to review what's actually being included in the planning document itself. Some considerations that go into this goal of meeting the goal of thoroughness in the public involvement plans. One thing we try to do is review prior planning studies, surveys, other data sources that have provided some input before we even begin that may highlight existing issues. We also consider whether some interactive mapping tools. You might also have heard the term crowdsourcing. This is where you might have an online map where you can drop a pin and describe a problem in a study area. But whatever these tools are, we consider using them depending on the context of the study to collect additional data from the public. We also want to reach out to community organizations or members of organizations, whether they're known to us or would be new to us, to make sure that they have some input in the scope of the project and some of the ideas being generated. And to follow up, we want to make sure that we continue those relationships once the project is complete, and we try to communicate the status of things through our newsletter or through our advisory committees and other resources. In terms of meeting the goal of continuous, yes, thorough. I think I misspoke earlier. Some of the required actions that we have is assessing who may be impacted by the study or the plan, making sure that we reach as broad of a cross-section of the community as we can. We want to make sure that we engage multiple modes of opportunities to participate, whether again that's through websites, in-person, virtual surveys, traditional media, newsletters, social media, maybe even as simple as flyering to announce a meeting. That all, we employ as many options as we can given the context of the community. And that we also develop summaries and visualizations to make sure that folks understand what can be sometimes very technical information in a digestible way for the public. We also, in terms of considerations for thoroughness, we consider whether we need focus group meetings, maybe institutional stakeholder outreach, et cetera, to supplement some of the known information we may have. Again, we try to use language that is as accessible as we can get it to a wide audience. Again, consider using low-tech methods like posting flyers, dropping mailings or flyers in mailboxes, postering in the community. It's not just virtual. Not everybody has access to the internet. And we try to get creative through tablings and other things and try to engage communities in these study areas that don't normally participate in the transportation planning process. To reach the goal of inclusivity, we require that we translate our materials for our core documents. So anything on a regional scale to comply with our limited English proficiency requirements. So that means, for example, our regional transportation plan for the organization is translated. The executive summaries are translated into Spanish, Chinese, and Arabic, because those three languages have a large percentage relative to the population of non-English speakers. We also try to look at for sub areas if there's a population where we have a high percentage of folks speaking another language that we try to accommodate for that as well. And we also want to make sure that everything we produce virtually and in person is accessible to those with disabilities. So sometimes visual tools may not always work for someone with a visual impairment. So we want to make sure there's some options for providing engagement for those with different disabilities. Some considerations for inclusivity. We think about, again, looking at the study area demographics and the communities that are present in the study areas and making sure that we think about what works best for their context. What methods may even be preferred by those communities. Some demographic groups like to do in person. Some prefer to be virtual. Some like a mix. So trying to tailor as best we can based on what we know in the community, what might work best. We do want to make sure that equal weight is given to the input we receive, regardless of whether it's received digitally or in person or one-on-one. And we also want to make sure that we are monitoring whether traditionally underserved populations are engaging in the planning process. And speaking a little bit about what we mean by that. So traditionally underserved groups are those that have in the past not been well served by our existing transportation systems and may face challenges accessing employment and services. Typically, these groups include those with low income and minority households. So one of the things we try to do is collect as much information as we can to identify what groups are present in the study area, how we can make sure that they're involved at the earliest stages of the process and improve how we're effectively communicating information, and that's culturally informed, given the demographics of the study area of interest. So again, this comes back to tailoring our approaches based on the folks that are represented in a distinct study area. For the goal of effectiveness, again, we try to conduct an evaluation at the end of each planning activity that considers the evaluation criteria outlined in the public participation plan. I'll review those shortly. We also try to collect demographic information on a voluntary basis to ensure that participants, so we have a sense from the participants who we're hearing from and who we're not hearing from. Some of we do better at collecting this information through virtual surveys because we can add a bunch of survey questions at the end regarding demographic information. It's a little harder sometimes for the in-person events, but we're working on methods to improve on that data collection. And then some considerations for effectiveness when building the public involvement plan. Again, we like to make sure that we document and review how we reviewed and commented on the public input that we received and how it was conducted. So what meetings were held, how many, what surveys were published, where. We make sure that we can gather and review the feedback received to see if there can be any improvements to our engagement process. We describe and make sure that to the extent we can document how the traditionally underserved communities, if present in the study area, were included in the process. And basically, at the end of the day, we want to be able to know and describe when efforts fell short and what some of the lessons learned are, because that will improve our process in the future. So in terms of the planning activities and public reviews, so I mentioned that we have some core Transportation Council planning activities. These are just a few that we do on a regional scale under the federal requirements. The first is the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. This is our regional plan that describes how we'll invest in, manage, and operate the transportation system over a 20-plus year horizon or planning period. Our current plan is called In Motion, the Plan to 2050. It's adopted every 5 years. We last adopted this plan in September of 2025. The public review for our new long-range plan is 25 days. That's the minimum public review. We usually do longer than that. We also have as a core planning activity what's called a Transportation Improvement Program. This is a document that contains all of the federally funded capital projects that are funded for construction in basically a 5-year period. We update the TIP, as we refer to it, at least typically every 3 years. We're required to do it at least every four. We last updated our TIP back in June of 2025, and we also have a minimum public review on that of 25 days. Our Unified Planning Work Plan or work program describes the planning work that we take each year by our staff, through our consultants. It's updated on an annual basis. We just updated it back in March. It becomes effective April 1st. The minimum public review period on that document is 25 days. And then this public participation plan that we're talking about today is another one of our core planning activities. We update it more or less every year, but I think, we're probably going to be doing it. The new plan actually talks about doing it every other year. It was last adopted in March of 2024, and it has a minimum public review period of 45 days. So those are some of the kind of thresholds for public engagement when something is new. When we're revising a document, there's a different schedule of minimum public review requirements, and these are some of the areas that we're actually updating with this version of the public participation plan. Partly because of that, with the speed at which things are changing in our world, federal fund deadlines, state deadlines. There's a lot of deadlines that happen much more frequently than our board meetings can actually react to. So we're trying to reduce some of the lengths of public review. It doesn't mean we're not going to do longer. I would say in most of these cases, if not all, we will have longer minimum public reviews on revisions to these documents, but we wanted to set some minimum thresholds, particularly for TIP, because federal funds can change very, very quickly. And we want to be able to be in a position to react to changes that are needed to keep projects moving forward. So most of the amendments for public review, for administrative modifications, we do not require public review. Administrative modifications can be simple copy edits, clarifications, changes to hyperlinks, and in some cases, very small dollar value threshold changes to projects or plans. Amendments are those that really are more impactful changes, maybe the core content of a document, some of the funding assumptions, policy adjustments. So those require public review. Each document, particularly our TIP, has some specific additional requirements which are available on our website. We do have some distinctions between a minor amendment and a major amendment for a TIP. Many of which are focused on either the scale of the amendment. So is it a complete scope of work change or a minor scope of work change? That may also be represented in an increase, a funding change that could be significant. So one that's over $3 million would be considered a major change. Something in the neighborhood of 1 to 3 million, it would be a minor change. But these outline the different thresholds for public review for each of these amendment types that would require revisions. And we feel that these are adequate and consistent with what other MPOs do across the country. So in terms of how the public can engage with us and how we engage with you on a broad scale as an organization, one of the things we try to do is a lot of outreach. We issue press releases for major decision points, and also things like our planning committee and policy board meetings, notices about public review of major documents. We also rely on our website as a repository for a lot of information that we can share and allow the public to comment on a regular basis. We have a newsletter that we encourage you to sign up for, that we distribute a ton of information about planning activities going on here at the Transportation Council or related to the Transportation Council. And then we also have active social media on a variety of platforms. Our meetings that are open to the public here at the Transportation Council include the Policy Board, the Planning Committee, and Advisory Committees. Policy Board is our primary decision-making body. It's comprised of our local elected officials. They meet 4 times a year, but they really are the decision-making body of the MPO. The policy board has chosen to delegate a lot of responsibilities to our planning committee, and the planning committee is comprised of usually staff of our member agencies. They meet 8 times a year. Those meetings are also open to the public. And we have 4 advisory committees for freight, regional operations and safety, active transportation, and human services transportation that are open to anyone who is interested in participating. All of these meetings, we try to post the meeting agendas and materials on our website 1 week prior to the meeting. We also broadcast the meetings live. They're all recorded, so if you want to go back and watch a recording of a meeting, you're able to do that on our YouTube channel. Members of the public can submit written comments at any time. You can also register to speak at a meeting. And if there's someone who would like some accommodations, we request that those requests be made at least 48 hours prior to the meeting so we can provide whatever may be needed. So the evaluation phase of our public participation process, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have both quantitative and qualitative metrics. On the quantitative side, we try to um, capture the number of in-person events we may have, how many attendees we had, how many comments we received. For surveys, we look at the number of responses we received. Did we receive any open-ended responses? For crowdsourced surveys, the pin drop idea, did we, how many pin drops we may have gotten or other submissions? We look at our newsletter and how many subscribers we have and how many people are actually opening and clicking through the newsletter. There's ways to capture that through software. Similarly with our website, we try to capture how many people visit our website and what areas of the website they're going to. We catalog how many press releases we issue. We also look at our social media metrics, number of posts, how many people are following, post impressions, engagement rates, whatever data we can capture. And again, coming back to that demographic analysis, we definitely try to capture as best we can who we're hearing from and if we're capturing those traditionally underserved groups. And we try to analyze this data, and we'll hopefully be able to analyze this data on an annual basis and prepare a short report, and maybe as simple as an infographic, sort of illustrating how we did and where we may have improved in the areas and identify areas for improvement. And along with that report, we look at some qualitative information as well, where we kind of discuss the effectiveness of our public involvement plans for each core planning activity, as well as our linkage studies, look for areas of improvement. We look at the effectiveness of all of our organizational sort of ongoing public engagement that we try to do on a broader reach. We try to summarize again those quantitative metrics. We look at goals that maybe we didn't do so well on if we did. Look for ways to improve and develop some suggestions for improvement. So all of that's documented in our annual report. So that kind of summarizes the public participation plan and some of the things that we're going to try to do in this new version. I did want to just touch upon quickly the air quality conformity determination, as this is also out for public review. So a little bit about that. The air quality conformity determination, transportation conformity is a rule that was established under the Clean Air Act. And what it essentially does is ask us what is the air quality impact on a given transportation investment? There was case law back in 2018 called the South Coast Air Quality Management District versus the EPA. And I should state up front, right now our region is in attainment for all of the air quality standards. But what this court case said is that we still have to do this transportation conformity determination because when we were back in 1997, we were in non-attainment or maintenance for those standards at that time. And so that basically we still have to do conformity to account for slippage. We don't want to slip back into a non-attainment standard. So that's one of the things that we try to do. Also, we want to make sure that we're in a, because we were also in attainment for the new ozone standards when the 97 standards were changed. We still are required to do this transportation conformity determination. So what triggers this? Um, One example is what we're doing right now, which is amending our regional transportation plan, also called the Metropolitan Transportation Plan or MTPs. So we're basically amending our emotion plan projects. And in that process, we have to develop a new area-wide conformity determination. So the first step in that process is we have to determine what projects we have in our long range plan that would be considered exempt and or non-exempt for air quality. And this list really are the projects in our in motion plan listed in the plan itself. We include all of our transportation improvement program projects that are listed in our 2025, 2020, 2030 tip. Um, we also have a number of projects that are categorized in different ways, but we know that these are longer term needs. There's a variety of bridge projects. There's the Schenectady Garage for CDTA, implementing our regional trails plan. Probably the biggest project in the region right now is what's called the Reimagining I-787 planning study that's now moving into a design phase. And it's really this 787 projects that's triggering this need to adjust this project list. The Reimagining 787 project is what's considered non-exempt for air quality analysis, which means as part of the environmental impact statement process, there's going to have to be an air quality analysis done as part of the EIS. Um, it's the only project we have in the capital regions that is categorized as non-exempt for air quality. And part of what we need to do is move from the original category. We have two categories of projects. Illustrative are those that do not have a funding commitment at this time. And then fiscally constrained are those that we believe we can fit into our funding estimates in a 20-year time frame, which is why they're included in the long-range plan as fiscally constrained. What's proposed to change with this amendment is several projects are moving from fiscally constrained to illustrative. One, the Albany Intermodal Center is actually being removed from the plan as Albany County is pursuing a version of the Intermodal Center in downtown Albany. But what we do need to do is we're moving our 787 project from illustrative to fiscally constrained and assigning an estimated budget for now of $1.5 billion. So in order to fit that into our best guess funding estimates, we needed to adjust and realign some of these proposed projects in our long range plan. So because of those proposed changes, we had to share that project list with what's called the ICG or the Interagency Consultation Group, which is a collaboration of different federal and state agencies related to transportation and the environment. We coordinate with them through the NISDOT Environmental Sciences Bureau, and they give us their concurrence on how we categorize projects for air quality in this air quality determination, which they have done. Um, we update the air quality conformity report and coordinate with our partners. Our air quality non-attainment area is actually larger than the four counties that the Transportation Council represents. So we actually have to involve our sister MPO, the Adirondack Glens Falls Transportation Council, and counties outside of our NISDOT region, Region 2 and Region 9, so Montgomery, Schoharie, and Greene in this transportation conformity process. That coordination is underway right now. We just had the ICG review and our draft report that the one that is released for public review. They have concurred with its findings. And so we have started this public review process, which again is a minimum of 30 days. Comments are due May 20th as they are for the public participation plan. And then next steps beyond this process is we're going to be revising and finalizing the conformity determination report, adopting that hopefully at our June policy board meeting, and then submitting it for Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration approval. And that will allow us to then jump into the amendment process for our regional transportation plan. So that's sort of the bulk of what I had to share today. We do have a number of resources available on our website at www.capitalnpo.org for both the public participation plan and for the air quality conformity determination. You can click on the links shown on your screen once you hit the homepage of our website, which will bring you to a number of certainly the documents themselves. There's an online survey if you would like to submit comments there. And again, the public comment periods for both of these plans are going to come to an end on May 20th. So submit your comments at that time. So with that, I will pause here and see if there are any questions from our audience. I don't see any in the chat. And I do not see any open questions in our Q&A box. So I will give you folks another minute if you'd like to submit a comment or a question. Okay. Well, seeing that there's no comments or questions, I just wanted to thank you for joining us today. Hopefully, you've learned a little bit about our public participation plan and why we do air quality conformity and what it means. Again, feel free to submit comments via our website if you have any follow-up questions. This recording will be linked on our website as well and made available for anyone who may have missed today's webinar. And I thank you for joining us. Have a great afternoon.